It didn't work very well. Hello, everybody. Thank you for clicking on an unexpected live. Um, and I'll just basically tell you what happened. I did the whole thing, I recorded the whole thing, which was the intent. And instead of hitting save, I hit delete. I didn't hit, it wasn't a delete button. I hit record, actually, is what happened. And instead of saving it, it deleted it all. So I thought, what the heck? It takes so long to set this thing up that I'm just going to do it live as late as it was getting. So that's what's happening. Hello. Hi, Casey. Thank you for being here. Hello, Breeway. Thank you for being here. Thank all of you for watching, everybody that's clicked on and everybody that's watching not live, watching on demand at a later time. Thank you for clicking on. Hey, Mavis. Hello, Shelly. Hello, Mo. Thanks to my friend Mo, I was able to go to Carb Day and see the practice portion of Carb Day last Friday. Thank you, Mo. Greatly appreciated. Good dude. And um, I enjoy when I get to meet somebody from the community, meet them in person. And yeah, thank you, Mo. Greatly appreciate. Hello, Guy. How are you? Thank you all again for clicking on. Um, as the title says, I've got a letter from John Fitzgerald Johnson, otherwise known as AKA Grandmaster Jay. And we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. And then I've got some other stuff as well. So stick around. But before I get to that, oftentimes I say, we don't tell you what to think or how to think. We just give you things to think about. And I'm going to do that tonight. I'm going to give you a lot of things to think about. And we're going to start out with some. And the first thing we're going to start out with is just thinking. Too often, I think that we, as humans, especially here online, we sometimes do things without fully thinking them through or without thinking at all. And if you are possibly guilty of that, just take some time, just kind of be conscious of your internet behaviors, and just maybe stop and yourself a couple of questions before you act or react online. Basically who, what, when, where, why, how. Those are questions that you could easily ask and can easily translate into online activities. Who is this person? Um, who is this person that's, whatever, giving me advice or, whatever it is, who is this person? Um, uh, what's the motivation? Why is somebody saying something? Why is somebody doing something? Um, why? Why is somebody doing something? Um, always ask where's the money go, or where did the money come from? Um, who's paying for the influence? There are so many things that so many times people just grab a headline or grab a comment or um, a community post, whatever it may be. Just grab it and run with it, and as if it were true. Um, that's a time when you might ask, "Who is this person? Why are they doing this?" I mean, just for your own um, individual kind of self-awareness, because things are toxic. I say that too. And I say that a lot. Things are toxic. One other thing I want to remind you of that we've talked about on here before, ABCs of the triangle of irresponsibility. You create a problem, you blame somebody else, and then you claim to be the victim. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't put yourself in those situations. Um, you don't look good, and people see through it because we keep pointing it out. So, and one final thing I want to give you to think about before we start all of this, because this might kind of play into a lot of the things we're going to be talking about throughout the night after we do the letter. I'm going to do the letter here in just a minute, and then I've got, like I said, a lot of other things, but I just want to share this with you. And let me see if I can get it to where it can all be read at one time. What we have up here at the top, is value, okay? And what we have down here is means. All right. We start out workers, and we move from workers. And this is how we are looked at. This is how the citizenry of the United States, this is how we, the people, this is how we are looked at, in my opinion, by the whoever they is, the powers that be, the elite, the upper 1%, the New World Order controlling everything, whatever it may be, whoever they are. Give this a thought. Workers. For a long time, we were a citizenry of workers. Then we are referred to as consumers. That's where the value is. The value is in the consumer, not in the worker. Keep that in mind. The value is in the consumer, not the worker. And we are transitioning into being burdens. Burdens. Think about that. Workers, consumers, we're transitioning to being burdens. Being burdens. Why would we be burdens? Because resources are going to become incredibly limited, incredibly expensive. And if you do not have enough money, you will be or you already are, a burden. When the debt ceiling talks come out, when we start hearing everything that all the deals that have been done, maybe you will see this. And means, well, the agriculture, the skilled trades, the artisans, the workers, all right? Workers are devalued. Farmers, skilled trades, artisans, they are not given the proper value. We transition from that to manufacturing and industry. And that takes us to robotics and artificial intelligence. The jobs are going to go to the robots and to the artificial intelligence if we believe what is postulated. And that makes us burdens because we're not going to have the jobs. I'm talking all the population in general. I'm just giving you some kind of big picture stuff to think about possibly. Okay. The jobs aren't going to be there. The money's not going to be there because there's no jobs. You're sure not going to be a consumer anymore. You're going to be a burden. Just something to think about, okay? Just something to think about on an early Wednesday morning, the last day of May, getting ready to be halfway through 2023. So, I don't know, take of that what you will. Just again, starting off with some things to think about. So let me get a drink real quick. My favorite cup, by the way. Um, I got this cup. I was given this cup in 2016 at the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I used to have all kinds of commemorative writing on it, but I don't know. I don't know what the deal was, why I became attached to that cup or it became attached to me, but it's my favorite cup nonetheless. So there's a little insight. Um, Again, thank you all for tuning in, for clicking on, for hanging out, and let's get this thing going. Um, okay, wait a minute. Yes, okay, that's what I want to share. All right. Okay, we're going to start out with um, a letter from John F. Johnson, otherwise also known as Grandmaster Jay, and it deals with Familia Kukanowskia. And I just want to show you, this is called a Lapa house. Lapa is a type of house. And the floor plans and designs for a 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath Lapa house. Why am I showing you this? I'll explain that in just a minute. I just want to show you the letter is here, but in order to read it, I've got to go back and forth across all the way. So I'm not going to share that while I do read it. Let me get here to the beginning. But I want to talk about the why the house. Why show the house? I started documenting what was going on with the NFAC July the 4th, 2020, which was Stone Mountain, Georgia. And then I became aware of things that had happened prior to that. And I've been covering Grandmaster Jay since that time, and this is part of that documentation because the journey does continue. And what Jay said, he said he was going to build a community, and even though he's incarcerated, he and his people are building a community. That's what the houses were about, and with that being said, I'll just read the letter. Dear Barry, let me get where I can move it back and forth. Dear Barry, I hope this letter finds you well. On behalf of Familia Kukansnakia, our online private member gathering, I wanted to reach out and share with you the incredible work we are doing as a group, as well as extend an invitation for you to go live and introduce our goals to a wider audience, which is what we're doing right now. First and foremost, I want to emphasize that we are not seeking any monetary contributions from individuals. We've already invested the funds we raised with a trusted financial firm, ensuring that we have the necessary resources to build new homes for our people at absolutely no cost to them. We firmly believe in creating a sustainable and supportive community for our members. This is just exactly what he said he wanted to do. He wanted to have a community basically of his people, for his people, and by his people. Group consists of over 30,000 strong individuals who share a common vision and commitment to off-grid living and state-of-the-art homes. However, we are currently seeking like-minded individuals who are the right fit for our community. We're looking for people who can contribute positively to the collective, who can embrace our values and add value to the lives of others within our community. To apply for membership, interested individuals will need to send us an email. The application process, as I will outline in an upcoming video, includes providing your name, address, the number of people in your household who will be joining you in your new home, and a contact phone number. Additionally, we kindly request applicants to write an explanation of why they wish to be considered to join our community, highlighting their alignment with our goals and values. Please note that if you are connected to people that have been against this movement, we are aware of your identity and we would kindly ask you do not apply. I'm not going to name names. We are committed to ensuring the integrity and authenticity of our community, and it is important for us to welcome individuals who genuinely resonate with our mission. We believe that I possess the unique ability to articulate the vision and goals to a broader audience. Your influential platform can help us reach potential members who may be the right fit for our community. And we would be immensely grateful if you would consider going live, which I just have, and introducing our aspirations and values during one of your broadcasts. By sharing our story and goals, you will be helping us connect with individuals who can contribute positively to our community's growth and prosperity. Together, we can build a vibrant and harmonious society that supports and uplifts its members. And we will be finishing with phases 1, 2, and 3 of the project by the end of the summer of 2024. This marks a significant milestone in our journey towards creating a self-sustaining and fulfilling lifestyle for community members. Thank you for time and consideration, Barry. We generally hope that you will join us in our mission to create a transformative and inclusive community. Should you have any questions or require additional information, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. With warm regards, John F. Johnson. So that is the letter from Grandmaster Jay. I've already received a couple of follow-up emails. There will be an upcoming episode where there'll be an email address given for those that feel they would like to apply and spread the word. Those in that community. This is one of those. Okay, just this one particular part of this particular episode. This is one of those that it's a Cinderella kind of thing. All right, the shoe's not going to fit everybody. This information's not for everybody. If the shoe fits, wear it and share it and let it be known. And if not, hang in here. We've got a couple more things coming your way in just a minute. So again, I'm honored, and I've been covering this and covering fairly and unbiased and calling out things on the rare occasions, and most of the time kind of setting the record straight that, look, what is being said is not what's actually happening. Here's what's actually going on. So they trusted me to make this announcement, and I thank all of them that are involved. And again, and I've been invited to come and visit once they have their first house up, and I will do that, and I will document that, and I will be showing that, streaming that, probably not live, but we'll be showing what's going on. So an exciting time for people in that community because this is a new concept. It's a place for like-minded people with the same values and same principles and same ideas that you know oftentimes it's very obvious that there are at least two sets of standards in our country, and for people to have a place where there's only one set of rules. Um, that's a luxury that we often take for granted, in my opinion. All right. Again, thanks for hanging in here. Thanks for clicking on. Thanks for watching. Let's get into the breaking news and the rest of this particular episode. According to Reuters, the U.S. House is poised to vote on urgently needed debt ceiling suspension. NBC News, Alabama expands the ban on trans athletes, and it now includes its college teams. From the Insider, the Wagner boss, that's this guy, that is the leader of the basically the private army in Russia. He has slammed Russia's military leaders after Moscow drone attack. If you're not aware of what's going on, Moscow was attacked by multiple drones. A few of them were shot down. A lot of them were successful. Some hit in some of the more posh areas of Russia. So some of Russia's elite have now kind of felt the sting of war. I bring this all up because Putin is, Putin's desperate. He's got cancer. Word is he's not going to be around long. And it's just something to think about. CNBC, the U.S. accuses China fighter jet of unnecessarily aggressive maneuver. What the Chinese fighter jet did, it flew so close to a U.S. surveillance plane that it caused turbulence in the cockpit of the U.S. plane. New York Times, a debt deal includes a green light for a contentious pipeline. Again, we're going to learn all kinds of things that are in this debt deal, and some things we may not be very happy about. NBC News 6, 2 arrested, 3 others sought in the Hollywood Beach boardwalk shooting that injured 9, including a 1-year-old. So that's what's going on headline-wise, and here's some things that aren't in the headlines, but maybe we should think about. Just give you something to think about. Donald Trump immigration threat has scary implications for his own family. Trump basically said that if both parents are not born in the United States and the kid is born in the United States, the kid is not automatically a citizen. And of course, his wife was not born in the United States, therefore, Barron would not be a United States citizen. Of course, it's rules for thee, not for me. Next headline, January 6th sentences are piling up. Here's a look at some of the longest that have been handed down so far. This comes from Politico. After more than 2 years since the January 6th riot at the Capitol, the sentences are piling up. Last week saw the longest prison sentence yet. More than 1,033 of the rioters. I didn't want to do that. How did that do that? Oh, okay, hold on. Sorry, that wasn't being shared. Good. All right. I was seeing something you weren't. More than 1,033 of the rioters have been arrested, with approximately 485 federal defendants already receiving sentences. 277 defendants have been sentenced to time behind bars. 113 have been sentenced to a period of home detention. And I bring all this up because there's a whole lot of focus on the January 6th corner, on potential outbreaks of various possible origins. Stuart Rhodes, founder of the citizens militia group known as the Oath Keepers, speaks during a rally outside the White House. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison for seditious conspiracy, and that might have a rippling effect. Peter Schwartz, 14 years. Peter Schwartz of Pennsylvania. And again, this is all for Donald Trump, which I don't know. Something to think about. Russia hits Kyiv in a pre-dawn attack. This just came in, and it's from the AP, Associated Press, not Anarchy Princess. Russia launched a pre-dawn attack on Ukraine's capital. And again, this just came in. As its air defense worked to stop drones in what has become a relentless wave of daylight and nighttime bombardments targeting Kyiv. And I've been seeing a lot of scenarios of them just getting tired of messing with it and moving nuclear weapons closer to the borders. Again, Putin is going to be desperate, and each day he's going to grow more and more desperate. Chinese fighter jet cut so close to the U.S. plane that it caused turbulence. We touched on that already. Got a few things here from our Twitter. Just a reminder that at the end of last month, there were indeed Nazis in Columbus, Ohio. Public service announcement from John Cooper. Most Nazis don't wear swastikas. Familiarize yourself with those symbols and keep your eyes open. These, especially tattoos, things like that. Know your enemy, know your friend. Depends on which side you're on. And that is for all of you to decide on your own. This is from Marty Taylor on Twitter. And this is Texas. Texas impeached Attorney General Ken Paxton. Paxton likely has another mugshot coming. He has admitted he threw out 2.5 million Texas ballots in order to allow Greg Abbott and Donald Trump to win Texas. We never could understand why Harris County, which is Houston, had such a low turnout compared to the rest of Texas. Now we know. Paxton threw out millions of Democrat voters. He told this to Steve Bannon while sending a message to the GOP-controlled Texas Senate that they must keep him in office to guarantee a Trump victory in Texas in 2024. Well, Paxton, he said this in another statement. Paxton said that if he hadn't been in office, Biden would have won Texas. What Paxton did was admitted he committed voter fraud and ballot theft and plans to do it again in 2024 if not removed from office. The DOJ needs to expand the Trump election to include Paxton. Both Biden and Beto O'Rourke supporters had their votes in Texas stolen by Paxton. He needs jail time. Okay, again, that comes from Marty Taylor. Again, something to think about, especially if you're in Texas. The senior FBI official who led the 2016 investigation finding no link between Trump and Russia. And again, this is despite the fact that there are news magazine articles with both Don Jr. and Eric saying that they had no problem with getting funds for anything. They didn't need American banks. They could get all the money they wanted from Russia. Charles McGonigal just got arrested for taking and laundering money for Russian oligarch Oleg Deripska. So another little tidbit to think about that the mainstream media just might miss. And again, threats from extremist groups growing. Service members and vets are getting sucked into violence. U.S. intelligence community deemed racially or ethically motivated violent extremism with adherents such as white supremacists. There we go. No. Hang on. I hope that's not impacting. All right. This is a really good article. Military.com. I'm not going to go through the whole article. But keep this in mind because where we're heading as far as our little feature feature program for tonight. I got a thing coming up that I think people will really want to see, and I'll get to that in just a second. This was supposed to be Tuesday. It's actually Wednesday morning, 1:28 a.m. as we're doing this. And Tuesdays we do science stuff. I'm going to touch on just briefly on the magnetic poles. Now I've got two different channels up. I've got Ben Davidson from Suspicious Observers, and I've got Gene Beard and Maverick Star Reloaded from the Navstar Observatory in England. And before I get to this, the reason I've got both of them up is I want you to keep in mind as I talk about these and we watch these, that while the two of them don't agree on a lot of things, not only the two of them, but science community, all agree that the magnetic poles are shifting. Mainstream media is not talking about this. It's not in our news. Could be because there's really nothing we can do about it. But it is, I think it's worth being made aware of. This is as of 17th of May. This is where the North Magnetic Pole was. Gene tracks this on a Gene tracks this on a every 3-minute basis, and according to Gene, this is the 40-degree mark, and this is the pole is approaching this. And according to experiments he has done and repeated often, once the pole crosses the 40-degree mark and gets into a weaker field of magnetism, it will flip into the southern hemisphere, and the southern magnetic pole will flip to the northern hemisphere, which will basically, if that were to happen, Um, it would pretty much throw us back into the Stone Age as far as communications, transportation. Um, I mean, the gas cars would still run, but would probably end up burning up a lot of processors. Um, Most of the electronics, um, navigation, all kinds of things are not going to function. Now, this is Ben Davidson. This is if let me, you can see that in
This
2019.
is one third of the story.
In 2019, basically the governments stopped monitoring. Here's where the magnetic pole used to be over Canada, and it migrated kind of slow. Well, you can see from 2000 to 2019 how far it moved, and let's just listen in.
Of Earth's ongoing magnetic pole shift, the rapid acceleration of movement from Canada northward and across the Arctic Ocean, heading towards Siberia and eventually the Indian Ocean. The second part of the story.
Okay. Um, Ben Davidson thinks that it's going to end up in the Indian Ocean and that both the poles are going to meet and kind of hit and bounce off of each other and head back to where they originally were. Um, Gene thinks the poles are going to flip, and this has happened in our past. We know it from um, ice core samplings and also fossils. Um, but it's never happened when humanity was around.
Is the South Magnetic Pole, moving more slowly right now, but way ahead in terms of their common meeting place, again, the Indian Ocean, with only about 50% of the distance to travel as the North.
Keep in mind, neither one of these guys um, can say for sure any of this is going to happen again because nobody's been around when it happened in the past. The last time was about 12,000 years ago.
Northern Magnetic Pole. And as we saw last year, the South Magnetic Pole is speeding up. Each of those dots is 1 year of motion, and so their greater spacing and separation of light indicates an acceleration of the Southern Magnetic Pole too. Of course, the third and most important aspect of the pole shift is the weakening of the overall global.
This is the most important and potentially concerning. The Earth's weakening magnetic shield. It tracks along stable, stable, stable. Even 1850. This is before the U.S. Civil War. Um, and it starts to drop. Now, watch the drop as we play it.
Global magnetic field. This is actually what shows up the most in the historic data. It is happening now, and it's the scary part of the shift. Let's look at why that is. The weaker magnetic field lets in more cosmic rays, both from the sun and from the galaxy. These charged particles can have tremendous impacts on several elements of the Earth system, including the ozone, where depletion due to increased cosmic rays is expected to amplify ultraviolet light penetration to the surface, something that has repeatedly been shown to be one of the causes of plant and animal losses during these magnetic pole shifts.
I've said in a couple of live videos that the sun feels hotter, uh, and that is because more UV rays are getting through, more burning rays are getting through. Used to be, if you want to lay out in the sun, you lay out from like uh, 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning until maybe 11 o'clock, and then you go inside during the afternoon hours because that's when the majority of the burning rays were coming. Well, the burning rays are going to be coming all hours.
They have definitive and well studied impacts on our brains as well.
Yeah, this is a potentially important part to think about as well. Um, Now, just just like all people are different, some people um, when this happens could feel happy or could feel better. A lot of people, it's going to impact potentially negative.
They have definitive and well studied impacts on our brains as well, including a loss of cognitive power, an amplification of panic and anxiety, reactiveness with emotional instability. Boy, if that doesn't describe today's world, what does? But these cosmic rays also have impacts across the central nervous system and on the cardiac system, especially in terms of heart attack, stroke, blood pressure, and heart rate. It can actually mess with metabolic and ion mediated processes in all biological life, which further explains why these magnetic pole shifts are so scary when they let in that extra energy from space. The highest energy particles penetrate into the crust and mantle and excite silica-rich magma, which is why amplified volcanic activity seems to accompany every magnetic pole shift in the geologic record.
Okay. Right now, there are about 25 active volcanoes around the world, and that is about average. We're not seeing a dramatic uptick in volcanic activity. If we do, it is a sign, and we should be aware of it.
It has a tremendous impact on clouds as well, due to the cosmic ray particle nucleation and the ambient electrification, which attracts water vapor to dust in the sky, helping to churn up those clouds. Of course, the magnetic pole shift is also going to affect animal navigation. It's most commonly known in birds, but it spans much more broadly. From migration to foraging to finding mating zones, marine creatures and mammals are now well known to be impacted, as well as several species of insects and even plants. From seed to germination to flowering, both charged particles and magnetic fields can impact their processes. All of the foregoing reasons are why.
So, again, just kind of making you aware that it is going on. You're not going to hear about it probably many other places. Is it conspiracy theory? No. The poles are moving. Is it the end of the world? No. The poles are moving. What's going to happen? We don't know. We know the poles are moving. And one of the things we do on this channel is keep you updated as to what we do know. So I'll hop back over here to the chat for just a second. Hi, GA from CA. I'm in Chicago. They were about to pull an attempted assassination on his life. He used the flashlight on his weapon to reveal them hiding on a building. Okay, I don't know who that's intended for. I don't think that's for me. Let me hop up. Spiritual rising. Where do you keep getting this bullshit from? He would never write you or give you. Oh, okay. Well, sorry, but he did. And there'll be another video coming out with all of the cease and desist. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Look, you guys can send your money wherever you want. You can do whatever you want, and you don't have to believe. Doofus, what do you keep lying about GMJ corresponding with you? I'm not saying he's we're not I get information that he wants out, okay, and I get it out. I don't ask you to send me money to send to him. I don't ask you to send me money to do anything. I just put the information out. If you don't want it, don't listen. Okay. And thank you for being here. Thank you for clicking on. Thank you for watching. Stick around because I got this next thing that is going to pertain to everybody. And I think it's something that that everybody, it'll give everybody something to think about.
Old or anything.
Here we go. This is from Wisecrack, Wisecrack, and this is a second civil war a real threat? Let's find out.
Okay, so not that I'm old or anything, but in my lifetime, things in America have gotten a lot more tense. When I was growing up, it was pretty common to treat political affiliation more like sports fandom, i.e., I could be a Bears fan and still be friends with a Packers fan, even if I hated their team. But today, it feels more like I'm a Bears fan and Dad is a Packers fan, so I will not be coming to Thanksgiving dinner this year. Indeed, it's become something of a cliche to say that America is more politically polarized than ever before. But it feels true. According to USC Annenberg's new Polarization Index, which measures political polarization on a scale from 1 to 100, America has a whopping 82.5 in 2021. A team of researchers writing in Politico in 2020 noted that 33% of Democrats and 36% of Republicans feel it would be at least a little bit justified in using violence to achieve their political goals. That was an increase of 9% for both parties in 2017. In this climate, it's maybe no wonder that polls indicate that somewhere between 43 and 50% of Americans have said civil war feels imminent in the next decade or several years. At least a little bit justified. In using violence to achieve their political goals. That was an increase of 9% for both parties in 2017. In this climate, it's maybe no wonder that polls indicate that somewhere between 43 and 50% of Americans have said civil war feels imminent in the next decade or several years, respectively. But you're probably thinking, people say crazy things in surveys all the time.
Give me something drastic a man might do to get out of marrying his girlfriend.
He gonna flirt with her mama.
But is there actually any merit to these fears? Let's find out in this Wisecrack edition. Could America have another civil war? The term civil war originated in ancient Rome around the 1st century BCE, according to historian David Armitage. He writes, the Romans were not the first to suffer internal conflict, but they were the first to experience it as civil war. Romans were no strangers to violence and war, but violence was never inflicted on its own citizens by its own citizens. For them, it was very important that wars engaged in by the state be rationalizable as just. In that case, how could a war in which the state was on both sides of the argument possibly be considered just? It couldn't, which is why ancient Roman commentator Lucan called civil wars wars which would bring no triumphs. Arguably, the first civil war started when a high-ranked Roman politician with a grudge named Sulla marched his troops through the city. Interestingly, this seems to have occurred on impulse. Armitage says the consul seems to have had no plans to march, but his loyal soldiers urged him on. What marked this as the first civil war is that the soldiers treated Rome like any outside territory they were trying to conquer, and employed all the formal signs of war, like trumpets and flags. Nobody in the Senate knew how to respond to this invasion. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Sulla was victorious and assumed a role as dictator of Rome. His enemies sought vengeance, and a second civil war ensued just a few years later. As Armitage explains, Sulla had not intended anything remotely resembling a military takeover of the Republic. And yet this act had marked the beginning of a cycle of civil violence, one that would not end until the creation of the empire with the elevation of Augustus as emperor in 27 BCE. As Armitage notes, the phrase Civil War was spoken sparingly, if ever at all, because of the harsh memories of major conflicts. The wars precipitated by Sulla's actions would come to define a huge part of Roman history. Rome's experiences with civil war, as recounted by many of the empire's most famous writers and thinkers, would then go on to influence the Latin West for centuries. Stories of Rome's civil war consumed European intellectuals and artists alike, and according to Armitage, inspired some of the most creative political thinking of well into the Enlightenment. He writes, indeed, for more than a millennium and a half, civil war was viewed through Rome-tinted spectacles. While it's hard to definitively say that Rome's history directly informed early modern European history, this pattern would play out quite similarly as Europe endured endless cycles of violence for centuries. European thinkers contextualized these wars through their understanding of ancient Rome's past, and concluded that, as Armitage puts it, civil war was one of the distinguishing marks of civilization. That is to say, you couldn't have a modern liberal state without the perennial threat of civil war. This was a depressing pill to swallow, and the optimism of the Enlightenment era in Europe, which began in the late 17th century and came to fruition in the 18th, led to some rebranding of civil war by intellectuals. Essentially, they took civil war and repackaged it as revolution. As German historian Reinhard Koselleck argues, theories...
Okay, keep that in mind. They took civil war and repackaged it as revolution. Now, he's going to explain why they did that.
Revolution emerged as a concept in contrast to that of civil war. Armitage adds that the nascent category of revolution was designed in part to repress memories of civil war and to replace them with something more constructive, more hopeful, and more forward-looking. Where civil war was senseless,
more forward-looking, more hopeful. In a civil war, there are no good guys until the end. Whoever wins writes history, and they become the good guys. As far as like reframing it to be a revolution, do we see that in our society today? Possibly. Again, just something to think about as we march quickly through history into our present.
Violence inflicted without hope for anything better, revolution was justifiable violence, enacted with hopes of creating a better world. The murkiness of
justifiable violence
revolution often plays out in real time. For example, when it took place, many viewed the American Revolution as a British Civil War, or the American Civil War. Not until a year into the war did a South Carolina judge call it the American Revolution, and the language wasn't adopted officially until 1779. Similarly, the American Civil War was for decades called the War of Rebellion in the North, which viewed the South as rebelling against their shared state. In the South, which viewed the conflict as an international one between two independent nations, it was called the War Between the States. Not until 1907 was it officially dubbed a civil war by Congress. Thus, from the very inception of modern revolution, the distinction between rebellion and civil war has been difficult to parse. As Armitage writes, it's easy to perform the conjugation. I am a revolutionary. You are a rebel. They are engaged in a civil war. Today, civil wars have come to define most of the armed conflict in the world.
Okay, did you see what he did there? One side says, I am a revolutionary. The other side says, no, you are a rebel. And the outsider says they are having a civil war. Again, there aren't going to be any good guys, bad guys kind of thing. There will be in certain people's eyes, but it's just going to be all bad. There are no winners in civil wars. The Greek guy said that right in the beginning. Let's go on.
1989, there's been an average of 29 civil wars going on at any given time. That's because after the fall of the Soviet Union, civil wars skyrocketed, reaching their highest numbers in modern history, until 2019, when they peaked again. So it doesn't seem all that surprising that people are worried about impending war in America. As Civil War scholar Barbara Walter explains, if you were an analyst in a foreign country looking at events in America, the same way you look at events in Ukraine or the Ivory Coast or Venezuela, you would go down a checklist assessing each of the conditions that make civil war likely. And what you would find is that the United States, a democracy founded more than 2 centuries ago, has entered very dangerous territory.
Okay, this is really important. She is saying, basically, if you're objectively looking from outside of the United States and observing our society as of right now, if you are an analyst looking at events in America, you would go down a checklist. You would assess each of the conditions that make civil war likely. And what you would find is that the United States, a democracy founded more than 2 centuries ago, has entered into very dangerous territory. Now, does that mean a civil war is coming? No. The reason I'm doing this is because, in all honesty, over this past weekend, I heard a lot of mumbling, a lot of behind the quiet utterances of civil war. So I thought we'd explore.
So, why the concern? Well, Walter is a member of the Political Instability Task Force, created by the US government to assess which variables make civil war likely. The task force came up with 38 possible variables, ranging from poverty to corruption to population size, and did predictive modeling to see which factors were most likely to contribute to interstate conflict. And to their surprise, the best predictors were not income equality or poverty. It was what they call the polity score of the nation. A polity score ranks a country on a 21-point scale from autocracy to democracy, with +10 being full democracy and -10 being a full autocracy. Countries like Norway, New Zealand, Denmark, and Canada are +10. Saudi Arabia is a -10. In the middle, scoring between -5 and +5, is what's known as a anocracy, or a partial democracy. Anocracies include Algeria at a +2 and Egypt at a -4. Importantly, anocracies are the countries most likely to descend into civil war. As Walter writes, all the things that experts thought should matter in the outbreak of civil war somehow didn't. It wasn't the poorest countries that were at the highest risk of conflict, or the most unequal, or the most ethnically or religiously heterogeneous, or even the most repressive. It was living in a partial democracy that made citizens more likely to pick up a gun and begin to fight. The task force found that anocracies are 2 times more likely to endure political instability or civil war than autocracies, and 3 times more likely than democracies. We might assume that super oppressive autocracies are most likely to spur the mass anger necessary to facilitate a civil war. But since 1870, the world has experienced several waves of massive democratization, which have been closely accompanied by waves of civil wars. Walter concludes that when a nation moves from an autocracy to a democracy, this in-between transition period is when it's at a high risk of enduring civil war. She writes, "A primary reason for revolt is that democratic transitions create new winners and losers. Because the new government in an anocracy is often fragile and the rule of law is still developing, the losers, former elites, opposition leaders, citizens who once enjoyed advantages, are not sure the administration will be fair or that they will be protected. This can create genuine anxieties about the future. This is particularly true if the countries attempt to transition to democracy rapidly, like some of the USSR's former satellite states, as opposed to gradually, like, say, Mexico." But what Walter is really alarmed by isn't autocracies turning into democracies, which have constituted a large percentage of civil wars in recent memory. She notes a more recent phenomenon. An increasing number of democracies are becoming less and less democratic, veering towards autocratic on the polity scale. Such countries range from the UK to Hungary to Russia. Walter writes, "Democratic countries that veer into anocracy do so not because their leaders are untested and weak, like those who are scrambling to organize in the wake of a dictator, but rather because elected leaders, many of whom are quite popular, start to ignore the guardrails that protect their democracies." So what does all this have to do with America? Well,
that last one, okay? Leaders intentionally ignoring what they call guardrails of democracy and intentionally leading the country in a direction.
A stable +10 democracy, it dropped to a +5 in 2020.
So,
the highest score.
Again, because I paused that, you might have missed that. What he said was, and you might have wondered why, he listed Canada, he listed various places that were 10s. Why it wasn't the United States at 10? Because we dropped down to a 5.
Possible for an anocracy, but an official anocracy nonetheless. Though the country surged back to a +8 in 2021, the shift was extremely alarming to Walter. She writes, a country standing on this threshold can easily be pushed toward conflict through a combination of bad governance and increasingly undemocratic measures that further weaken its institutions.
Okay. Country standing on this threshold where the United States is now can easily be pushed toward conflict through a combination of bad governance and increasingly undemocratic measures that further weaken its institutions. Take a look at some of the things that are being proposed in Congress at the moment as far as bad governance and undemocratic measures that further weaken institutions. Let's go on.
But America recovered, so we're in the clear now, right? Well, while our anocracy score did rise back up, there's another reason to be concerned. Because you know what's the second highest factor in determining a country's likelihood of descending into civil war? Factionalism. While Walter notes that early 20th century...
Factionalism, tribalism, being put in boxes, being categorized, being labeled and marginalized, factions, us, them, good, bad, human, inhuman. All of those things we see in our society.
Civil wars were mostly waged over ideology or class. Since the mid-20th century, they're often centered around clashing ethnic or religious groups fighting for dominance. As Walter explains, countries that are considered factionalized have identity-based political parties that are often intransigent and inflexible. Boundaries between them are rigid, leading to intense competition and even combat. The groups that are competing are often about the same size. In fact, it's this balance of power between the two groups that creates such fierce rivalry.
Okay. Bump that back for just a second and ask...
Intense competition and even combat. The groups that are competing are often about the same size. In fact, it's this balance of power between the two groups that creates such fierce rivalry.
Okay. Does that describe the United States? Again, I'm asking you, I'm not telling you it does, but let's read this quote and you judge for yourself. Countries that are considered factionalized, are we factionalized? If so, we have an identity-based political parties. Do we do that? Often intransient and inflexible. Do we check those boxes? Boundaries between them are rigid between the two parties, leading to intense competition. You're not supposed to talk to anybody in the other party, leading to intense competition and even combat. Groups that are competing are often about the same size. In fact, it's the balance of power between the two groups that creates such fierce rivalry.
Fittingly, the Founding Fathers worried that if the project of the United States failed, it would be because of factionalism, which doesn't sound far off. America's two main parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, are sharply divided by many metrics: ethnicity, education level, religious affiliation, and geography, specifically rural versus urban. And for the most part, these parties seem to hate each other. A study by scholars Nathan P. Calmo and Lillian Mason found that 20% of Republicans and 15% of Democrats think the country would be better off if large percentages of the other party straight up died. And this might lead us to assuming that Civil War 2.0 is on the horizon. But civil war in America today would not look like the 19th century. Walter predicts that it would take the form of insurgencies, i.e., revolts against the government, and preparations have been made. America saw the rise of far-right militia groups recruiting members, stockpiling arms, and even traveling abroad to train in the early 1990s. But in recent years, militia activity has skyrocketed. Between 2008 and 2011, the number of militias in America ballooned from 43 to 334. Importantly, insurgencies typically follow three predictable stages.
From 43 to 354. And that was from 2005 to 2011, and we are in 2023. The actual number of individual militias supposedly has gone down. However, overall militia membership has risen.
According to the CIA. The first is pre-insurgency, where groups build a common identity centered around grievances. Second comes incipient.
Let me back this up just a second so we get this whole thing, since I talked through a little bit of it. Okay, here we go.
In 2008 and 2011, the number of militias in America ballooned from 43 to 334. Importantly, insurgencies typically follow three predictable stages, according to the CIA. The first is pre-insurgency, where groups build a common identity centered around grievances. Second comes incipient conflict, where random acts of violence are committed. The final stage is open insurgency, which involves organized attacks ranging from guerrilla warfare to assassinations to bombings of infrastructure like bridges or schools. Walter argues that the January 6th attack on the Capitol was the first act of open insurgency in the United States. She writes, "We are a factionalized anocracy that is quickly approaching the open insurgency stage, which means we are closer to civil war than any of us would like to believe." And as we've seen in the past, this is concerning for a couple of reasons, which we can draw from history. One, insurgents will likely view themselves as revolutionaries. And two, the launching of one civil war can often precipitate unavoidable cycles of future civil wars. And all these tensions are magnified by social media. Walter cites social media's penchant for prioritizing provocative content as having material political effects. We did a whole video about that.
And that's why I started out the way I did by reminding everyone that, ask questions before you get involved in social media of any kind, whatever it may be. Just take a time to maybe think things through just a little bit. Social media is playing a big part in what's going on in our society.
So check it out. She notes Myanmar as a prime example, where Facebook promoted content that fanned the flames of a horrific ethnic cleansing, despite persistent warnings from journalists and human rights organizations that this was happening. Walter argues that
that's what we're doing here. We're trying to warn people that this could be happening. And if we do think it's happening, let's stop it.
Media platforms' pursuit of profit serves to promote fascism all over the world, dividing nations, turning violent impulses viral, and eventually making civil war more likely. With the United States having the third biggest population of social media users, this certainly seems like cause for concern. But there's another side to all of this that's equally important. As journalist Fintan O'Toole cautions, predicting future civil wars can actually make those conflicts more likely to occur as it increases paranoia on both sides. So in some ways, predicting a future civil war can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. What's more, it's important to remember, no democracy that has slid into anocracy has experienced a full-on civil war. Yet, Walter is simply calling attention to an alarming new phenomenon.
Yes, just because we have slid from a democracy into an anocracy doesn't mean there's going to be a civil war. If there were any, I imagine it will be a limited basis, and it would not be the geographic breakdown as we saw, as we learned about from the Civil War that we see represented here. It would be. It's not going to be black and white. It's not going to be young and old. It's shaping up to be right and left, if you will.
Another reason to be skeptical is that the United States Army is, for better or worse, way stronger than it was in the First Civil War, when it was composed of approximately 16,000 members spread across the country. Today, we have 1.3 million soldiers, 900,000 in reserve, and about 450,000 in the National Guard.
But where are these soldiers now? Where are these soldiers going to be in 6 months? Conflicts potentially arising all around the world. That too is something to think about and to consider.
Absent a military coup, this makes an armed insurrection significantly harder to carry out. Furthermore, America's factions are less concentrated geographically than they were in the 19th century, with even the reddest states containing liberal urban centers. So it's hard to imagine war breaking out between regions. And in short, we're not going to say America is on the brink of civil war, and not just because that makes such a thing more likely. But none of this answers the question, why all the intrastate tensions? Well, philosophers have been thinking about civil war by various names ever since they started considering the structure of society, which means at least as far back as Plato's Republic. Plato got the ball rolling on philosophers being concerned with the question of how to keep a state, empire, or political community in general functioning, and how to avoid violent conflict within a polity. In planning his ideal society, he offered tips on everything from education to child rearing to who should be in charge, which was a philosopher. Unfortunately, he didn't really account for things like natural disasters and foreign invasions, which are both factors that eventually led to the downfall of the Greek polity. Eventually, this ball got to Thomas Hobbes, who thought that what you really need is a king who everyone obeys, even if he sucks, because even the worst government is better than the best civil war. Eventually, Carl Schmitt, a 20th century political theorist and a literal Nazi, jumped into the chat. The state's job for Schmitt is to protect its citizens while creating the conditions for any internal issues to be solved with non-violent political communication, because the opposite, civil war, is the same as the end of the state itself. As scholar Jan Kujawski explains, civil war, as Schmitt puts it, equals the dissolution of the state, as this is the end of a territorially closed organized unity that is not available to political alien entities. Instead of a closed system where shared values enable political exchange, we get all-out conflict. So how does this happen? According to Kujawski, the emergence of civil war might be related to any sort of situation in which a political force would emerge that would gain great popularity, that would be able to guarantee to society more safety than official state authorities. In such a case, the submission of the citizens would be directed at specifically this force and not the weak state that would be unable to provide safety. Put more simply, when the state seems incapable of protecting its citizens, but another force emerges that can, or at least appears to be, then a civil war is born. People side with the new force in the face of what appears to be an increasingly illegitimate state. Conflict ensues. This is concerning, whether or not you think your state is doing a great job of protecting you. At the same time, Plato's dream of a long-term peace, what he called stasis, is just that, a dream that's not viable in a world where we can't control natural disasters and economic turmoil. And the idea of a benevolent monarch has a history of going pretty poorly. So we're left with Schmitt's guidelines to the stakes of and prerequisites for a civil war. A government without legitimacy met by another force that offers a potentially better scenario for at least some of the state's citizens.
And they point out a good thing. Government without legitimacy, and even to this day, you're seeing the
and prerequisites for
stop the steal
government without legitimacy met by another force
right there. Stop the steal. That was promoted before the election in 2020 even happened. the polling numbers were bad, and Trump started saying, if I lose, it's stolen, to delegitimize the elected government. And obviously, as they're pointing out, that does nothing to stabilize the society.
For at least some of the state's citizens. So the best way that American government can avoid civil war is to attempt to gain back a greater level of legitimacy, which is a tricky feat in such a polarized country. And at the end of the day, it would be silly for us to predict whether civil war will happen, much less how to avoid it.
Okay. Again, this video came from Wisecrack, and I thought we should explore, because I've been hearing civil war tossed around a little bit over this past weekend, and it was a little bit concerning. And I thought maybe we ought to just, as a program, take a look at what that actually means and how close are we. Like he said in there, if there's some way we can stop it, we ought to be. I know how this works. Okay. There are going to be those that see this and go, man, we're not, that it's all still fun and games. And I hope you're right. There are those that watch this and go, well, I can see exactly where we are. And there are going to be those that, think maybe there's no hope, but there's always hope. Okay. But the fact that the two sides, if you will, are so ensconced, and there's such little communication, not only in our political system, which is toxic, but in our own individual discourses. Okay, so with that being said, Lori Arnold's going to be on here Thursday night, as we do Thursday Night Live with Lori. We'll be starting that live at 9 p.m. Thursday night Eastern, which will be 8 p.m. Central, 7 Mountain, and 6 Pacific. So hopefully you'll join for that. And if you want to email me, you can do so, americandufus@gmail.com. If you'd like to help support the show, that is always appreciated. And thank you very much for those of you that do. The Cashapp is $ American Dufus, all one word, AMERICANDUFUS. And I will have another episode coming up. I'm going to have a recorded episode just with the Grandmaster Jay, John Fitzgerald Johnson information, and that'll be coming out very soon. So again, thank you all very much for clicking on. Thank you for sticking around, and we will be back and do it all again. If not before, we'll be here Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, another episode of Doofus After Dark, and that one will be with live with Lori Arnold. So namaste. Blessings be upon you from the Most High, the Holy Spirit, with the power of His Son. Shalom, shalom, assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for tuning in. Much, much, much good vibrations, peace, love. Live long and prosper. It's a dark world. Try to be a light. World needs more light. Less toxicity, more light. I love y'all. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.